My name is Kjell Rubensen, and I have the pleasure of chairing this session. And I think it's 9 o'clock, and being a kind of a Swede, I like to start on time. And the session will deal with one important issue around lifelong learning, namely the whole issue around guidance services. Guidance services is identified as a key strategy for nations wanting to move lifelong learning into a way that answers to flexibility of labor markets, active welfare policies, and lifelong learning studies. And we are very happy today that we have a stellar panel. If you go from my side here to the left, it's first John McCarthy, who is the Director of Center for Career Development and Public Policy, Belinda McCarran, who is the Francis Tuttle Endowed Chair, Occupational Studies. And after our presenters, we will have two commentators. The first one is Ji-Yoon Lee, and she is a research fellow at Korean Research Institute, and Song-Il Na, who is Professor of Agriculture and Vocational Education. And I would just do a very, very brief introduction as they come. And the idea is that they will talk for 20 minutes each, and then commentaries. And maybe, hopefully, we have some time for comments. I would be very kind of hard if they go over their time, and there's heavy penalties. John McCarthy, I said he was the director of Center for Career Development. This is an interesting center because it's a joint initiative of the OECD, World Bank, and European Commission. And it is supported by different education ministries, guidance deliveries agencies, and practitioner associations of several countries. And before this, he held the post as policy development developer at European Commission in the Directorate of General Education and Culture. And he has been the EC's leader of the expert group of lifelong learning guidance. And he has other very important work he has done for the CDFOB. So with no further ado, please, I welcome John McCarthy to speak.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's a small audience, but a very select audience. But before I go into my discussion, I just want to say a big thank you to the organizers and to the sponsors for inviting me here. And I want particularly to thank them for the kindness of the welcome. Really, in Ireland, we have a tradition of being a welcoming country and a welcoming nation. And can I say that here in Korea, you have huge competition with Ireland. It's, if Samsung can do better, all right, and Hyundai can do better, well, certainly in the area of welcome, Korea really has a lot to teach the world. And thank you very much. I'm going to speak this morning. I have the privilege of speaking this morning because it's the first time that career guidance and public policy has appeared on the agenda of the forum, and that adds an importance and significance to this particular session. And I'm going to speak from a macro political and systems position. I'm not going to speak from the kind of everyday work of guidance practitioners. I'm going to look at things from a policy and systems perspective, and I'm going to draw on my experience and knowledge from a region of the world, Europe, where I would say is the leading part of the world in terms of policy and systems development. And when I say that, it's mainly reform of existing policies and systems. It's not so much developing something new, it's to try and reform what exists. And that is the perspective that I will be taking. I also want to start by something that has happened since the presentation of since the preparation of my paper, because 3 weeks ago in the French Parliament, adopted a new law that gives every French citizen the right to lifelong guidance services. And it defines these services in terms of virtual services, such as a national telephone helpline for guidance, such as web access, and also in terms of face-to-face, which is the traditional model of guidance that most of us know and have grown up with. And it also includes in the law the possibility for workers at different stages of their lives to have an appraisal of the competences that they have, so that they can redirect or upskill or train themselves for other jobs that might follow their interests and also follow their economic circumstances. Yesterday, I think we had some interesting statistics presented to us in the plenary sessions about the number of jobs that people have before the age of 27 and the number of jobs people have before the age of 42. And I think people who work in the public service, while they understand a lot about internal mobility and career direction and career transitions, I think people who work in the private sector have it even more challenging. And even yesterday with the presentations that we had from people who work in large-sized companies, the reality in Europe and probably the reality in Korea is that most people work in small to medium enterprises. So if we're talking about workforce upskilling, then we need to look at models like the French are presenting in their new law in order to assist the workforce to upskill itself. So essentially, I think the point that I'm making in relation to France is that career guidance is not only a private good, it's a public good. And it contributes, if this works, it contributes to the achievement of a lot of different public policy goals. Now, it's interesting when we look at these because the origins of career guidance go back to the 1900s, go back to Frank Parsons, and go back to the whole idea of social equity and social inclusion. So even he was trying to approach an ideal and a model of life which didn't form part of the policy thinking of either the federal or state governments in the United States at the time. But he was looking at the reality of people's lives and seeing how can we improve the quality of their lives? How can we improve the quality of their work lives? And to what extent can the human sciences and the social sciences contribute to that? And so, but if we look at the modern arguments, okay, a lot of the modern argument is around economics, like efficient investment in education and training. And I'll give you one example of this. The British Treasury, which is the British Ministry of Finance, 3 years ago made a recommendation in the context of upskilling the workforce in the United Kingdom. They made a recommendation that if we have a policy for upskilling the workforce, we have to have a support career guidance service for the workforce. And this was amazing to see this come from the Treasury, because normally you would think this will come from the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of Labour, but it came from the Treasury, because the economists in the Treasury were saying, well, if we want efficient investment of public funding and private funding in continuing training for adults, we need to have a service that will enable that to happen. And we do have statistics and studies to show, particularly in the field of adults and in Europe and from France again, which show that if you have a career guidance service for adults who want to go into continuing training or to change direction, that about 30 to 40% of them change their minds about which course they want to do after they have gone through this guidance process, which means that I think if you were to look at that in general terms, they had the risk of 30 to 40% of people not completing or not qualifying from a training program. So the argument about efficient investment of public funding and private funding and people's own individual effort and family effort, it's a very, very strong one, all right? And it is there. But I have to watch my time on this, so you'll excuse me. I mean, I'm Irish and I tend to speak long, all right? And watch my clock here, my chairman, because I don't know what punishments he has in store for me if I don't do this. The other, what I wanted to say here is that career guidance has certain kinds of outcomes that we can predict. I mean, we can predict that career guidance will improve people's knowledge and skills, and in the immediate term, and particularly in relation to job search. And we know that it will help that if you look more longer term, if they have well learned these skills, they can use them again and again. And in a longer term, it's also true that, again, as the example that I gave you, where career guidance is before training, occurs before training of adults, the higher the possibilities of people completing and qualifying from their training programs. And if you look at the combination of these and see how they fit, we see that, for example, that it has other benefits then for learning providers and for employers, and looking from that in a broader term for the economy as a whole. Now, some governments react to all of this and they've been delighted with the existence of the web and the internet, because they say that's all we need. All we need is a career service that can operate on its own, and it can be information only based. And it's a very easy logic, and it is also true to say that information is necessary. But the question is it sufficient, right? And the answer to that is, it's not sufficient, because first of all, the question is who's controlling the information, what kind of information is provided, what kind of labour market information systems do we have to collect, how is that translated into careers information, and how do individuals differ in their capacity to understand and to use and interpret this information and then put things into action. Right? And there are enormous individual differences. So an information-only system, if that was the case, then the British Treasury would have put up their hand straight away and said, we only want an information-only system, we only want a web-based system, and we don't need the other two supports, which are the National Telephone Helpline Service and also the face-to-face for people who feel that they need that. So why all of this interest in Europe in career guidance and public policy? And it reflects really a vision for Europe that we want to be the most competitive economy in the world, right? We're competing with Korea and with Asia. It also reflects the fact that in order to do so, we have to have a competitive workforce, right? And we have to upskill the existing workforce. So most European countries are planning on 2020, the year 2020. Now, those of you who understand English know that 2020 vision sometimes isn't really a good vision, but we do hope that in Europe, the way that we look forward, we're trying to plan ahead and see what do we need to do, and if we look sincerely at this, we have to reform our existing education, training and employment policies. And that's not easy in a context where in Europe the responsibility for these policies is belonging to the member state and not to the European Union as a whole. So it requires a lot of skill, diplomatic skill and cooperation between the member states to move forward on these. And so it reflects the general changes of which you were all aware. The fact that the focus now is on lifelong learning as opposed to initial education and training, that we're not only concerned about workforce preparation, which was a concern of the past, we're now looking at workforce development. It doesn't exclude workforce preparation because you need the two. We're moving from employment to employability. Because we can't guarantee employment anymore. Nobody can. Nobody could have well, I won't say nobody could have predicted. The economists surely predicted the financial crisis that was coming up. But on the other hand, the effects of that have left an awful lot of people unemployed across the world. And therefore, we have to think in terms of employability and flexicurity as opposed to employment itself. And also to look at this in terms of lifelong guidance, because though these terms did not exist 10 years ago, in the European Union 10 years ago, we never spoke about lifelong guidance. But since 2004, we have been speaking about it, because we look at it as the chairperson presented at the beginning. It's a necessary support system for lifelong learning. And lifelong learning is at the core of European employment policy and of European flexicurity policy. So why the need for reform? Well, we've had international reviews of policies for career guidance undertaken by the OECD, by the World Bank, and by the European Commission and its agencies. And it's very clear that while we have a lot of data about processes and inputs to career guidance, we have very little data on outcomes and outputs. But that's not the only problem, because it goes back to an original problem, which is that policies for career guidance are in general poorly defined, poorly articulated, and poorly communicated. And we also know that the existing policies and delivery systems do not match the needs of the knowledge-based economy and society, and therefore we need to reform. Now, in European terms, we started off in the early 2000s by establishing an expert group by the European Commission to look into this. But what's interesting about this expert group is its composition. The composition was of 25 people, of which 6 were experts in career guidance, and the rest were not. And the rest included representatives of the European social partners, the trade unions, the employers, and European civil society, such as the parents, such as youth, such as consumers. And we also had representatives of the ministries for labour and the ministries for employment and ministries for youth. So, and it produced a very different picture of career guidance than if you had 25 guidance experts in a room who will produce many fantasies but completely out of touch with reality. And this was a very, very good mix, because this composition was in itself reflected subsequently in the development of national coordination mechanisms in the different member states of the European Union, where policies and systems around career guidance are being debated, what we would describe as national policy partnerships. And I think that's very important, because I feel, even though I come from the guidance community myself, and I was a guidance professional, and I was also a university trainer of guidance professionals, I also am very clear in my head that the professionals, there was a gap between the profession and the policy, all right? And I'm not saying it's the professional's fault. I mean, it's a fault on the two sides. But in a sense, now we are viewing a more citizen-centred approach to career guidance. And I use the word citizen very strongly, because in career guidance, in general, if you look at the textbooks, they talk about clients. But that client gives the idea of a balance of power between the professional and the user of the service. Then that balance of power has gone too much, and it needs to be brought back up. And so we talk now about citizen-centred and about citizens' rights. And I think it's a lot stronger concept than the concept of client. Interestingly, and those of you who know the field of career guidance well, there have been civil wars, professional civil wars, fought between different sections of the career guidance community on what is guidance, what is counselling, and all of these things. And at a European level, the Ministers of Education decided we will give a political definition. And it finishes all the debate, all right? So the political definition is interesting because it includes lifelong and life-wide learning. And that is, again, a much broader concept than in the past, where we simply looked at formal learning as the only learning. And in their reform priorities, they set out several. They said we need to set up lifelong guidance systems. As we have at the moment, we have silos, all right? We have historical accidents of guidance systems arising from the ministries of education and then from the Ministry of Employment, and there's no connection between them. And that's in most parts of the world is the same thing. So we need to look at lifelong guidance systems that brings the efforts of the two ministries together and their responsibilities. We also need to look at the issue of quality assurance. And it's interesting that the Ministers of Education said we need a quality assurance system that is citizen-centred, that is user-centred, where the opinions of the users of the service and their experiences inform the providers of the service in order to improve the service. It gives another definition to the term client-centred. So I'm just saying that we need to broaden our concepts from the traditional ones that we have had. And the other issue is around the question of evidence base. All right, we need to have a proper evidence base to support policy making in this field, and we don't have. All right, we're a long way from it. And we also have stakeholder involvement, which means that it's not only the guidance experts who decide what goes into policy. It's the public who owns the service. The service only exists for the public, so the major shareholder of career guidance services are the general public, are the citizens. And therefore, of course, their voice has to be heard in this in a variety of different ways. Some of these shifts in thinking, I would say, are important because if I pick out any of these, is the question around prevention versus remediation. That the idea now is that what we do need is we need to teach citizens the skills to manage their careers throughout their lives and not just provide a remedial service when they have a crisis. It's a different approach. It's a cheaper approach, long term, but it requires investment, of course. Right? So I think one needs to look at the balance between prevention and remediation. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. In terms of what happened, this agreed position made in 2004 by the ministers, they set out these priorities. So we looked to see the implementation, and we didn't really have developed at European level a proper support system to support the implementation of the 2004 Council of Ministers resolution. But there are some good examples in European countries, and these are ones that you can look up in your own time. And I think in my paper, if you can download it, you'll see plenty of good references for you to follow up on that. It's sufficient to say that since 2004, in 2008, the ministries decided that they would set up a European lifelong guidance policy network to support policy learning and policy sharing between the member states. We have plenty of examples for many years of exchanges of practice. We have no mechanism for exchanges on the issues of policies, and that's very different. It's moving up a level. I see here that I'm being warned about my time. So just to say that the reform areas are still more or less the same as for 2004. And we have this European Lifelong Guidance Policy Network whose job is to facilitate policy sharing. It's made up of representatives of the Ministries of Education and Labour from most member states, and also civil society and other groups are included. And again, their responsibility is to monitor this implementation and to strengthen the links between policies for career guidance and policies for employment and social inclusion. Right, so career guidance is really a means to an end. It's a means to achieve public policy goals in education, training, employment. It's not an end in itself. And I think in the past, the profession treated it more as an end in itself. And the reasons for, if I was to say, why has this taken off so well and so far? And I would say a lot has come through international institutional cooperation between OECD, the World Bank, the European Commission, and also through different systems that they have set up. So, for example, the centre where I work, the International Centre for Career Development and Public Policy, which, by the way, has a really good website, has plenty of policy material and policy evaluation material for those of you who are interested to look from different countries. We don't yet have anything from Korea, but we're looking forward to getting it, and we will publish it in Korean. Okay, the website is a multilingual website, so you can see things in many different languages. All right, we need a little piece in English so that you will tell us what you want to put up there. Just to say that again, what has been important, if I was to pick it up, I would say it was also to have officials in the ministries of education and labour and also in the international institutions who saw where career guidance fits to support policies for public policy goals in education, training, employment and social inclusion. And so the policy challenges remain, all right? There's whole idea of broadening access. How do we give all citizens equal access to services? How do we give citizens equal access to comparable treatment? Because, I mean, if I go here in Seoul into one career guidance provider and if I go to another career guidance provider, will I get the same treatment? Will I get comparable treatment? And the same is a challenge in Europe. If I go into my hometown in Cork in Ireland, or if I go to Naples in Italy for career guidance, will I get comparable treatment? And so in Europe, we are looking at that. We're not saying getting exactly the same, we're saying getting comparable treatment. And so the other issues that I've mentioned are already there. So I have 1 minute left, as my chairman tells me, and really I think I have rushed along, and I think I've said all that I want to say this morning. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'd be delighted to answer any questions that you have at the end of the session. Thank you.
And as you said, the paper is available on download.
Yes, you put on your...
The paper is available for download, so you can kind of go back and get deep in yourself even more in this topic. Moving from the very broad issue of the European policy, Belinda McCarran will now speak to us. And she is presently, as I said before, the Francis Tuttle Endowed Chair. She holds that for occupational studies. And there she does the kind of teaching, researching, and grant writing. But before that, she had a real life when she was the Associate State Director for a Career Support Service in Oklahoma Department of Career and Technology Education. And in that capacity, she initiated several very important initiatives like tech prep, career academics, high schools that work, and technology centers. So she will now speak to us from this kind of double perspective.
Thank you. I too am fearful of our chairman, so I will try to stay on time and avoid the paper. I echo John's remarks about we pride ourselves in the U.S. By having we call it Southern hospitality, which we always provide food and great warmth, but the Korean welcome has far exceeded our Southern hospitality. So, John, I quite agree. The Irish hospitality is very well known, and our Southern hospitality is well known, but Korea has set a new standard. So it is very, very pleasant to be here. This is my first trip to Korea, and I've been very pleasantly impressed by your country and the warmth of your people. So thank you for the invitation. I'm quite honored to be on such an esteemed panel. So as our chairman said, yes, I did have a real life before academics, and it is a pleasure. I am a career counselor by training, as John is, and this has been a lifelong passion to talk about career guidance in the way in which we enable the average person to access those services. And so what I would like to do is, in depth, talk a little bit about what we're trying to do in my small state of Oklahoma. And the U.S. has not had a unified policy on career guidance. I'm very envious of the EU and the steps that Korea has been taking, because we have not had the presence of forethought to provide such a uniform policy in the U.S. We tend to treat each state as an individual nation, and each state then develops their own policy. So we have a patchwork of policy. So if I move to Texas or New York State, I will find quite a different system. So this is one state's attempt to try to bring together education and workforce and economic development, because now we are seeing that as a very much a uniform process. I won't spend time, my brief time, in talking about these changes. They've been well documented by our speakers earlier yesterday. But these things are impacting our career structure, and therefore the approach that we take for asking citizens to access this structure. So we're seeing now, because of the downsizing of companies and also the proliferation of smaller companies, entrepreneurs, that people are having to look at their skill sets much differently. They're much broader skills. We no longer have many assistants, deputies in large corporations. The corporations have become much more flattened. So the way to move about in today's economy in the U.S. is to have broader skills. And that's often a mystery, very problematic on how you access those skills. We know that the rising educational expectations in the U.S., we have as one of our speakers yesterday spoke about, we have a real dichotomy in the U.S. We have rising educational expectations, but we also have a higher dropout rate of our young people leaving the high school prior to graduation. And so we are having to deal with this. You know, how must we do this at a time when industry is expecting much higher level skills? So we know that education is positively related to salaries and wages, and that we have to have improved connections between industry and education in order for all of our citizens to access equitably those opportunities that we have in our current workforce. There we go. The new workforce must know how to learn repetitively, no longer as we have had in the past in the U.S. You go to work for a company, you work 20 or 30 years, you retire, and life is good. We know that there's such a churning in the workforce that people must know how to continuously learn. We know that you must be much more entrepreneurial, even within a large corporation, because each individual division or segment of the population does require entrepreneurial activity. And so that has become a definite part, and also it goes without saying to be technologically savvy. All of these skills support economic development, and that's what we're all about with the keen competition there is globally. We know that we must have every one of our citizens capable of being productive in this workforce. We do not have the luxury of having an underclass that is not able to access the world of work. So we know that education is a lifelong activity, as is career development, and we know these changes are impacting it. We also have longer lifespans in the U.S., so people are working longer. We're seeing the trend for pensions to be available to individuals at a later age. So it is not uncommon to see people retire from one profession and to reskill into another profession to work another 10 to 15 years. We need those people because we are an aging society. As the gentleman from Japan spoke yesterday, we are aging, and so therefore we don't have the luxury of retiring at age 55 and then being a leisurite, as we've spoke about with Super's career development theories. We now must continue to work. So because of that, we have to have people able to access greater career development supports. And so again, these are the 21st century skills. I won't belabor these because I want to get into the meat of what I'm talking about, but all of these things have been well documented in our previous speakers and also in literature. But I do want to talk about where we are. In the U.S., we talk about the baby boomers that were post-World War II, of which that generation is the generation I belong to, and then the baby busters, born from 65 to 84. You can see the radical change in the lifespan of their knowledge and skills. In my generation, you were probably pretty good 12 to 15 years after you graduated. Today, it's 30 to 36 months, and I'm even seeing estimates of 12 to 18 months of a life expectancy of the knowledge and skills that you have. So recent graduates have about a year before those skills become obsolete. So we must have a generation of lifelong learners. Therefore, we need career guidance to support those lifelong learners to help them access those services for knowledge and skills, as John spoke about. We have to move our educational system from the bricks and mortars of schools into anytime, anywhere, where learning goes to the student rather than the student going to learning. We do not have time in our busy lives raising families to go to an institution. We must be able to access those skills. Therefore, we have to change the way in which we are delivering those skills. More virtual, as John talked about with the dial-ups and the online services, we can't always go into a school or an institution for that assistance. This is just a little bit, as I'm sure you well know, we had lots of low-skilled jobs in the 70s, very easy to enter the workforce. In the 90s, we had a narrowing of low skill, lots of semi-skilled jobs, and very few high-skilled jobs. Today, and this is, 2012 is just the day after tomorrow, we see many, many high skills, semi-skilled, and the low skill is becoming even narrower. So what that's telling us is that more and more of our citizens in the U.S. must aspire to having the higher skills necessary to be successful in the world of work. We have a skills gap where 80% of the jobs will require some form of post-secondary education after high school. Yet we have about 25% of our students dropping out of high school prior to graduation. So this is a dilemma that we must face in the U.S. We have lots of theories about how to do this, lots of models being tried, so it is really a time of experimentation in the U.S. But we also see an interesting phenomenon called reverse articulation, in which we have college graduates in certain areas unable to find work. They're coming back to the community college for technical skills. So we do not have a good match between the degrees that people are seeking and the skills required by business and industry. So we are very much in a state of flux today in the U.S. on how we bring together a better match of skills and education to bear to impact the world of work very positively. And we also need the continuing skills development. So we are entering what we're calling with the employment community, the economic development and education community, the collaboration zone. So we must collaborate. No longer can we have the silos that we've operated under for the past 50 years. We really must collaborate and bring to bear the discussion about what is going to drive our economy, what are the skills needed, and how can education help provide that. And the employment community must also have the accessibility to those individuals to help provide the support to do so. So the collaboration is going to be critical. So education is economic development, and economic development is workforce development. We call it the power of E3, employment, education, and economic development. And we know that human capital is the most important thing that we have. We know that the unlimited energy resources that we all thought we had is drawing to a close, so we really must invest in our human capital for innovation and creativity to move us forward. And so career paths and a pipeline of skilled workers is going to be very, very critical. Math and science are foundational skills. Okay. What we're doing in Oklahoma, we have a national, it's not sponsored by the government, it's sponsored by vocational or career and technical education in the U.S. We're trying to provide a career development structure that is more uniform across the U.S., to provide a map for continued learning and providing a common knowledge, common language for all of these different populations. And what we're doing are developing national career clusters or pathways. So we are looking at 16 career clusters with some 79 pathways that are trying to commonly represent the current world of work in the U.S. And so and I know this is very difficult to see, but again, you can download this on the PowerPoint. But through human services, for example, you see these 5 pathways. At the bottom are the foundational cluster knowledge and skills that everyone, regardless of education level or aspiration, must have. And so you see things like academic foundations, communications, problem solving, the 21st century skills that I spoke about earlier. But then you begin to see, and if you saw the entire model, it would be quite overwhelming, but you see these occupations, but within those occupations are specific knowledge and skills that are necessary for success of the incumbent workers in each of these pathways. This is enabling us to better align the curriculum in career and technical education education and academic education into post-secondary education with a similar basis for the knowledge and skills necessary as expressed by business and industry. Within that, we're trying to develop career ladders, or lattices as they are also known, which is really a skills map to take the mystery out of how does one begin to enter a particular pathway. So it's the ability to connect current skills with future opportunity. We have many in Oklahoma. We are a very young state. We are just now 100 years old, so we do not have a long tradition of education. I was a first-generation college graduate. My mother and father did not complete high school. We have many of our citizens in the same situation. So trying to build a way to show people that with modest skills or low skills, they can access these higher skilled jobs through a series of educational opportunities. And so we're trying to develop these maps also for small business and industry that do not have large human resources departments that cannot express how their jobs fit together and a flow of skills into higher level opportunities. So we're trying to develop these skill maps, if you will, to show a lower level of progression, and also for those who have not had equitable access to supports for education and career guidance, to enable them to have a social equity, if you will, to access these maps online or through frontline career providers. So this is a very busy, busy map, but let me see if I can try to show you. For example, we're trying to show that by going from a trainee and showing the different certifications and areas of expertise, how with education and additional credentials, they can move into the expert level of careers. So beginning from very, very modest skills, this is the way you enter. If you have the middle level skills, you can also enter. The piece that you do not see, that our industries do not really like us, as we're working with each individual industry, do not like us to speak about, but there's another piece of the model that also shows how these knowledge and skills are transportable across industries. So, for example, the aviation industry in Oklahoma is very cyclical. It's has very, very high times of great profit, but then it cycles down as certain economic factors show themselves. And so what we have to do then is to enable people to understand that as careerists, as people that have control of their own careers, they have the skills to move to a different industry when there is a downturn in this industry. They are not locked into one industry with those knowledge and skills. So enabling people to have the power to make those movements, and as John said, from employment to employability. And that is absolutely the piece that we're trying to do with this model. Oops. So there's a greater need to retrain middle-income workers to those higher levels of skills. Middle-aged workers, like myself, are going to need to re-career to stay viable in the economic market. Because again, with pension plans, with some of our scandals that we've had in the workforce very recently, many people have lost their pensions because of greed and unethical behavior. So we're finding older Americans are having to work longer. So dislocated workers, where industries have downturned, they're suddenly on the streets because they've been in a factory job where they've not had to develop their skills. Now they're seeing a manufacturing industry that is very nimble, very lean, and very advanced, and so they're having to add to those skills that they've had. The advantage they have is that they have worked in a manufacturing atmosphere, they understand it, but now they need the skills to be viable in the new manufacturing, which is very much frontline thinkers, very innovative people, the creativity that we've seen discussed at this conference. So we have to continually develop those innovative skills, and as John said, we have to provide equitable access to career development and career guidance. And so the career ladders provide the expectation that learning is continuous, and that is the one message that the U.S. must get to all of its citizens, that you no longer can get a job and expect to stay there without doing more to improve your own skills. And the career ladders provide a picture of career progression. And also, we have to educate our citizens better on how they connect to the larger picture of economic development. If they are viable, if they are productive, they are helping their industry, which in turn is more competitive in the world market. So it's all interconnected. One thing leads to another, and so we must impress upon our people of that connectivity and their responsibilities. So there's my email address, and I've covered this very, very quickly, and I look forward to our discussions. But it is so critical. Career development, career guidance in today's world is absolutely critical, and that we provide that equitable accessibility to all people so that they understand how to access the services, the knowledge and skills, and that are essential in 21st century. We could go on and on about the equitability of paying for education and that kind of thing, but that is not our purview today. But that is certainly a part of quality career guidance to help people understand how to access the funding and the support necessary to improve their skills. So thank you for allowing me to be with you today, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
So after these two very thoughtful presentations, we now will have commentaries from our panel. And the first one is Ji-Yeon Lee, who is the research fellow in Korean Research Institute for Vocational Education. And she has, where she has worked since 1997. But she has, during this time, a very broad experience as a consultant, both in Latin America and also doing research within the European Commission, in the Directorate General for Education and Culture. So I presume that she and John have certain things in common over the time. So we are very, and she is also very distinguished in her awards. She has a Deputy Prime Minister Award for Ministry of Education and UNHRD, and she won an Outstanding Dissertation Award at the Ohio State University. So please.
Thank you very much. I'm Ji-Yeon Lee, work for CRIVET as a researcher in the area of career guidance and career development. I have one question and one suggestion to first presenter, and one question to second, Dr. Belinda. To first presenter, I really appreciate that we clearly understand how much career guidance is important in supporting education, training, and employment policies from your presentation, especially with the lots of international references. My questions goes to remain policy challenges on your presentation. You point out that the developing of evidence base for policymaking is important. Yes, it is important, but I think this is not easy because the evidence is closely related with the data from career guidance outcomes, and policymakers are never happy with non-measurable evidence such as job satisfaction. So they'd like to see the right now, clear quantitative evidence rather than long-term qualitative evidence. So I would like to ask the question that what and how we can collect and develop and support the evidence of career guidance outcomes for making policymakers happy, especially at the research institutional level. I'm asking the methodology to collect the evidence, the policy. And also, John McCarthy, you point out that even on your paper, even it has not been easy. There have been several contributing factors for career guidance to the political agenda in education, training, employment, and social inclusion. one of the factors is the exchanging of ideas, exchanging of practices, exchanging of policy reviews through international and institutional collaboration and cooperation with the OECD, ILO, EC, blah, blah, blah. So I hope and I suggest that if there is any opportunity to involve such an international cooperation and collaboration work, please let Korea, especially CRIVET, participate your research for the improvement of career guidance system, both for Korea and for all. And second, Dr. Belinda, thank you for your wonderful presentation, and especially for the case of Oklahoma practices. I think rapidly changing workplace surely influences both to education and to people's responsibility of their career development more and more than before. With the connection of first presentation of Dr. John McCarthy, I can find out that very interesting and similar terminologies such as employability skill and career management skill and flex security. According to his paper, he explained flex security is a mix of three-sided terminology, such as flexibility, social security, and positive labor market policy. I think those are very important and very meaningful for the world of work, education, and training in the 21st century to everybody, to all. So, Dr. Belinda, if you have any best idea that how we can deliver employability skills, career management skills, and flex security in education setting, I mean the school setting, to the students. Can you share your idea? Please, thank you.
Thank you very much. We should thank you for the comments. And to be fair to all the work that our commentators have given to this, my suggestion is that we ask the presenters to react to this rather than just to pull in more and not remembering the very important first question. So please, John, and then we go.
Okay, just to address the question of evidence-based policymaking. Evidence-based policymaking is a real buzzword now in the European Union. We have to have evidence before we can. We have to have evidence that the policy works, which is a valuation question. But sometimes we are asked for evidence before we start, which is a more difficult challenge. But it is true to say that the guidance community worldwide and the trainers of guidance practitioners have been, I think the trainers of guidance practitioners have been really remiss in not really addressing the issue of the need to collect data to show effect. And I think that I don't know if I could say it's a North American tradition. We can always point the finger somewhere. But it is true to say that there is now a concern for all policy areas to have evidence. And it's not easy in the area of public policy. For example, you mentioned, Belinda, the 3 E's, education, employment, economy. And you might think on paper that there's a linear relationship between the 3, that as one goes up, the other goes up, the other goes up. But that's not the case. All you need is a financial crisis, all right, and then they all collapse. Well, 2 of them collapse, and the 3rd one maybe stays still the same. Or it can be affected as well, cutbacks in the education sector. So I'm saying that the challenges are big, and not only for career guidance, they're there for all policy areas. But what I will say, we need a starting point. And I think the starting point is collecting data and having a common approach to collect data. And in that respect, it would be very interesting to have cooperation between CRIVET on behalf of Korea and other international networks, policy networks and organizations to look at issues like this. And within that debate at a national level, there has to be a discussion between practitioners, policymakers and researchers to come up with meaningful data for all three. Because it's true that their needs are actually quite different, but they need to start talking a common language, and particularly to find data that they all can agree it's a way. And this approach has been adopted in Canada, and it's now been looked at in terms of developments in the European Union. In relation to the methodology, I mean, there are different statistical methodologies like contribution analysis and like studies using counterfactuals, all right? So we have methodologies, all right? And they're not all necessarily drawn from the discipline of psychology and the social sciences. The economic research is something to teach us too. So I think we need to look at this in a multidisciplinary sense. So I think I'll leave my answer at that.
Thanks a lot.
Dr. Lee, you asked about the delivery of career development skills to students. The model I discussed of the career pathways and career clusters, we are developing, based on those career clusters and career pathways, we are developing what we are calling plans of study. And this is beginning at the end of 8th grade for students to help them look at the appropriate high school courses, both academic and technical, that will prepare them for either work or continuing on to post-secondary education. So we are beginning to place a great more emphasis in helping students plan, not just take courses that they enjoy, certainly that's important, but to help them anchor into future plans so that they understand the relevance of those courses. So we're very hopeful as this begins to expand that we will help young students understand why they need the advanced math and science and be more willing to take those courses and stay in school. And so we've done a few studies with schools that have been very progressive in doing this, and we're seeing a greater retention of those students into post-secondary education or apprenticeship. So the planfulness to help students understand why those courses are important rather than you will need those courses someday, to help them understand how it connects to their future in the world of work. They may change their minds about the cluster, and that's okay because those foundation knowledge and skills of which I spoke are very similar across all career clusters. The understanding about self-management, about how to manage resources, that's transportable across all career clusters. So that's how we're beginning the approach. Again, there's no national requirement, but many states are now requiring, each state is requiring each student to have a career plan of study that must be reviewed each year at a minimum with someone from the school and a parent or guardian so that they can remain on track in light of their tests that they take for academic progression, their career interests, and then their interest in going on for post-secondary education.
Now we will turn to our second discussions. Professor Song Il Na, who is Professor of Agriculture and Vocational Education at Seoul National University. He also holds two very important portfolios in the Korean life here. He is the editor of the influential Journal of Asian Vocational Education and Training, and he's also the present president of the Asian Academic Society of Vocational Education and Training. So please, Professor Song Il Na.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. I am very honored and enjoyed Dr. John and Belinda's presentation today. They did a wonderful presentation, and I enjoyed listening their presentation. Also, I learned many things regarding career guidance and career development. All in all, I agree with their opinion regarding career guidance and lifelong guidance too. But I would like to add my idea and some comment about their presentation. I think both of them emphasized that career guidance is very important and is the key factor for career development as well as job preparation or continuing success in their life. I agree with that, especially career guidance should be national policy because career guidance could contribute to many public policy goals such as social inclusion or labor market efficiency, lifelong learning, and social equity, etc. So I think right now also I learn about the kind of a focus of education and training has been changed from initial training to lifelong learning, and from lifelong, workforce preparation to workforce development, and from employment to employability and flexibility and with security. And I'm sure, especially Dr. John raised a new term like lifelong guidance that could be useful to understanding how much important career guidance as well as career development for the people as well as the student in Korea too. And it is widely recognized that more effective guidance will assist the development of a knowledge-based society and benefit individuals, employers, employees, and society. Effective career development support is very important, not only individuals, but also for the organization that employ them. Therefore, guidance and counseling is the key strategic component for implementing lifelong and employment strategies at the regional as well as at the national level. Career guidance is a key factor for public education too. By the way, in Korea, we adopt career education as a part of the national curriculum since 1981. Since that, our government tried to teach teachers how to integrate career education into the school curriculum as well as their individual courses. For the high school level, we provide career and vocation as an independent subject for the high school student right now. Even though career education still needed to improve many things, such as because still we are more focusing on transition, kind of helping by providing career information regarding what type of schools and what kind of major or universities for individual students based on their achievement score. So that's why still we need more focusing on career guidance as well as career education should be as a national policy. Korea has made many important progress, but still much commitment is still needed to implement fully the lifelong guidance and to build up consistent and accessible guidance system, which will truly accompany citizens in key transition point of their lives. Another thing I would like to share, there are many providers of career guidance for workers or employed, even unemployed adult. Ministry of Labor, under the Ministry of Labor, there are many institutes such as Korea Employment Information Service or Korea HRD Service. Those public institutes provide career guidance services. And there are even employer also, they provide similar guidance, but those employees are big companies such as Samsung or LG or Hyundai. But there are many small and medium-sized companies in Korea. As I understood, about 99% of the total companies are small and medium-sized companies. They are not unable or they are not willing to provide career guidance for their workers because they are too small. They lack of the resources. So that's why career guidance should, as a part of the national public policy, we need more focusing on providing for small and medium-sized workers rather than any other big companies. Also, I would like to comment regarding what kind of the implication from their presentation today for our government. Let me briefly cite some sentences such as we need to strengthen lifelong learning system by connecting education, training, employment efficiently. Secondly, we also need to provide more career guidance services for all the workers or unemployed workers or unemployment youth. I think some of you recognized or heard about the NEET. NEET stands for not in engaged employment, education, or training. There are many young Korean people, they designated as NEET young people. I think Dr. John mentioned about career guidance is a way of preventative rather than remedial measure. I totally agree with that opinion because right now, unemployment rates of youth in Korea is about 8%. It's twice times as much as the total, which is big. So I think if we do have a national policy, and then we may prevent with those unemployment youth. And I would like to some of a comment regarding Dr. Belinda's paper. As I understood, in USA, there are 16 career clusters is related to the career paths. But unfortunately, in Korea, about 700 vocational high school in Korea, that's independent vocational high school. I'm sure some of them, about 200 of them, are comprehensive type of vocational high school. But those programs are classified into traditionally agriculture, industry, commerce, or fishery and maritime, and home economics. But that means, as I am sure, I think we are still covered the narrow industry rather than United States. So for the public school, we need more expand our vocational education program into the broad occupation, especially for the 21st century. In order to create various career paths, we need a kind of a tool such as a skill standard or occupational standard. I think that's as a common language are very important. So that's why our government try to develop Korea's skills standard or national occupational standard right now. I think those standards are very useful by connecting training, education, or employment. Even we have a singular school ladder system, right now we try to diversify high school, especially vocational high school should be specialized based on their focusing industry. So we call specialized vocational education. That's the right now kind of a model for all types of vocational high school. But big vocational high school should adopt the kind of a career pathway. Even general high school also adopted that kind of a system. About 20 years ago, we initiated vocational training through the general high school. But that's not the way USA, follow career pathway. I think for the general high school, we need to initiate kind of a career pathway for some of them. At the same time, vocational high school should consider career pathway as an option for some of the students. Yes. And I'm going to add one more thing, and then I'm going to quit my comment. Especially, there are normally components of career education. We say like 3 components, such as understanding oneself, understanding world of work, and decision-making, career decision-making. Based on my observation in Korea, we need more focusing on providing hands-on experience for the student. That is very important. Because Dr. John mentioned about that career information is necessary and important, but that's not enough. That's not efficient. Especially in terms of the career guidance and the education, for the student, we need to provide a very variety of the work experience as well as the hands-on experience. Through those experiences, students could recognize what are their interests, what are their strengths and weaknesses. Based on, they might choose their preference or their appropriate job or their career in the future. So that's my final comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Song-Il Na, for helping us to draw the 2 papers into a Korean context. And I think now that rather than asking for any commentaries just now from the panel, I would like to open it up to questions, comments, and when you speak, will you please just let us know who you are and where you come from. So, and I know there are microphones available, so just raise your hand and don't be shy.
Okay, so thank you so much for your nice presentation. 2 of you. I was president of National University in Korea, but retired, and then now